So this first service, if I fall asleep up here, it's because of the lock-in. I feel like I am kind of like falling asleep just like for a split second, and then I come to, and I'm trying to figure out why are all these people here, why I'm on stage. But no, it was a lot of fun. I survived. I've said this to a couple people. Didn't know the toll that it takes on an adult body when you stay up all night, like physically sore and things like that. But it was a lot of fun. All that to say, knew that we were going to be starting a new sermon series today, and Jim Bob last weekend was like, "Oh, Nathan, you got the lock-in. Do you want me to do the intro? Even though it's your turn." And I had just had so much fun doing the research for it already. I was like, "No, I really want to do it." So it's going to be an interesting sermon series. If you guys have ever thought about spiritual warfare, I know that's something that doesn't come up in conversation a lot. If you want to make a conversation awkward, bring up religion. If you want to make a religious conversation even more awkward, talk about the devil. I think whenever we address a sermon like this, like you need to think of the question, like, do you believe in Satan? Do you believe in the devil? Do you believe in Lucifer? Do you believe the Prince of Darkness, Old Scratch? He's got a lot of names. Do you believe in him? It's an important question for us to consider. I think a lot of times when we think about spiritual warfare, or people who believe in spiritual warfare or want to talk about spiritual warfare, we kind of get a picture in our mind, like fringe Christianity, fringe Christians, the weird ones that you don't want to relate to. But if that's the case, then Paul, the apostle, would be a fringe Christian. He brings it up in almost every one of his letters. The man responsible for the majority of the New Testament and for most of what we believe now, as far as Christian theology goes, he believed in the devil. I think it's interesting for us to answer that question. It's really the question you have to start off with when you start this conversation on spiritual warfare. And it's a question that Barna did in a survey. So I'm gonna post it to you guys first. Would you guys not post it? This is not electronic. I'm going to ask you guys. So would you agree or disagree with this statement? Satan is not a living being, but is a symbol of evil. That was the question that the Barna group came up with in their survey. It was a survey on the belief of Christians, just Christians, in God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and Satan and the spiritual realm. This is just a whole series of questions. I want to focus on this one for now. And I want you guys to think about that. Satan is not a living being, but is a symbol of evil. Is that something you agree or disagree with? Or maybe you don't have an opinion on the matter. That was also an option in this survey. The interesting thing that came out, this was in 2009, survey of only Christians. It was something like, it was a group of randomly selected Christians to answer this survey. And the statement, Satan is not a living being, but is a symbol of evil, 35% of Christians disagreed with that statement. Only 35%, a little more than 1 in 3, disagreed that Satan is not a living being. That leaves 6 out of 10 Christians who agree with the statement, Satan is not a living being, he's just a symbol for evil. That's a lot. That's the majority. I don't know if you guys are good with stats. That's the majority of Christians don't believe in the devil. This is actually weird. It's flipped from society. That a different survey was done a couple years later, and if you ask the general population whether they believe in Satan, it's a lot higher. But the crazy thing about this statistic is in the same survey, so the same Christians answering this question, Satan is not a living being, but is a symbol of evil. You see almost the same proportion of Christians. 6 out of 10 believe that the devil is just a symbol of evil. They also believe a person can be under the influence of spiritual forces such as demons or evil spirits. They don't believe in Satan, but they do believe that you can be possessed by a demon. Does that not blow you guys' mind? To me, that just says that they don't know. Like, this is not something that the general Christian community thinks or talks about very often. 6 out of 10, Satan's just a symbol of evil. But if you're not careful, you might get possessed by a demon. I do think, too, of all of the Christians who do believe in Satan, right, that he would be, that he's active, right, he's a person that can interact with us. I think that they're confused, and to them, Satan is that picture of the little voice that sits on your shoulder and tries to get you to do the wrong thing. Oftentimes the fun thing or the end thing. And then you have the boring angel on the other side. Nathan, you shouldn't do that. Do you believe in Satan? So, if he's not a symbol of evil, and if he's not that little voice sitting on your shoulder telling you to do the wrong thing, then we have to ask the question, who is the devil? Who is Satan? And what is his goal? What is he trying to do in the world? We read in Ezekiel and Isaiah in the Old Testament. There's not a lot of information, but in Ezekiel and Isaiah, it talks about God creating this angel, this beautiful angel. And because of this angel's pride, he's cast down from heaven. And it says in Revelation, when he falls, his tail swipes a third of the stars from the heavens, which means he takes a third of the angels with him in his fall, cast down to earth. And then after this, we don't know how long, but at some point after this, God creates everything, and Satan sets his eyes on man. Don't know why. Probably something to do with his pride. Peter writes in his first epistle this about Satan, 1 Peter 5, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kind of sufferings are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world." If he's a prowling lion, do you think he has every intention to have people, especially Christians, believe that he's just a symbol of evil? That seems like the perfect prowling strategy. I'm just a myth, just what the ancients believed in and talked about. Modern society doesn't need to say anything about little old me. And if you do believe in him, well, then don't you think he wants you to believe that he's that little guy sitting on your shoulder, just trying to suggest that you do the wrong thing? If it weren't for the devil on my shoulder, I'd be able to stay out of trouble. I'd be able to do the right thing. When in reality, the intention, the goal of Satan is to devour you. We see this from the very beginning, right? After the fall, he sets his eyes on man, this new creation of God's. And really, one of the first interactions we see in the Bible is an interaction between mankind and Satan the serpent. And what does Satan bring with him? He brings destruction. The separation of that relationship that we have with the divine. But that wasn't enough. His job wasn't over. If we look in the book of Job, it opens up with this story about this guy named Job. That's why it's called Job. And this book was actually one of the first books of the Bible to be written down. It's an ancient oral tradition, was written down probably before Moses penned Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, the Torah. And in this ancient story, it opens with this man Job, and then it jumps to heaven, and we see the devil standing before God, and God asks him what he's been up to, and he talks about, I've been going to and fro among the earth. I've been prowling. And we jump ahead to the New Testament, right? Feels like a whole different section of the Bible. But Jesus starts his ministry off, right? He's baptized and immediately goes out into the wilderness. It's recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all three of those Gospels. Goes out into the wilderness, and who does he meet there but the devil? And the devil is seeking Jesus' destruction. Because if Jesus is destroyed, then all of mankind is going to fall. The worst part about it, too, is whenever we feel that destruction in our life, like when we start to feel the destroyer, it's so easy to just write that stuff off. Like, oh, my marriage is just going through a rough patch. Or, yeah, I just can't get anything right at work. That's why I was fired. Or, yeah, I don't know where all this debt came from. Yeah, I got diagnosed with cancer, but it's treatable. Like, it's just so easy to write off, to not think about this lion. So, when it comes down to it, Satan is at battle with us, whether we want to believe it or not. And the first step in winning that battle is to acknowledge that he is real. Like, Satan is a person. He's not a symbol of evil. He is actively seeking to devour you. That's kind of a sobering thought. I mean, almost scary to think of an enemy that you can't see, that's seeking after to destroy you, and who is quick to blame it on something that makes more sense to you. But we're not powerless. Paul starts talking about that in 2 Corinthians. This would be his second letter to the church in Corinth. Towards the end, he talks in chapter 10, "For though we walk in flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds." We don't have physical weapons, but we do have weapons if we're willing to use them. You guys starting to get the idea of this battle that's going on? A little bit of a feeling that there might be something that we're not quite aware of. It makes me think of, I have a 2-year-old son named Brock, and he has a whole bunch of cousins, but one of them is very close in age to him. They're just a couple months apart. And anytime Bowen comes over to our house, or they're playing at Nani's house, their grandma, they battle. They are super intense about it too. They'll come over and tell us, "We're going to battle." And then they run off and jump on the trampoline. This is them. This is an older picture. It's been going on for a while. This is probably from a year ago. I'm going to fool with this microphone for a little bit. And they're serious about it. And normally they're more evenly prepared. Bowen doesn't gang up on Brock like that with 2 lightsabers. He could probably take him, but they normally fight. And they just go back and forth, air kicks, tackling each other until one of them gets hurt, and then they, come crying, and they're done with battling for a little while. Our battle's not with the flesh, but we can feel it inside of us, right? That there is a battle that's going to have to be fought. The crazy part of that, though, is we feel that battle that has to happen, and we're so quick to blame other people. We see the destruction around us, and we want to start pointing finger. And we use the power and the authority that's been given to us, these non-flesh weapons, to start tearing other people down. In this same letter, just a couple chapters later, in Paul's conclusion, he says to this church in Corinth that he's coming for a visit. And when he gets there, he wants to use this authority to build the church up, not to tear people down. Like he's almost calling them out for something that they're doing. We're so quick to point our finger because it must be someone that's responsible for the destruction that we're experiencing. It reminds me of a story from the book of Daniel. Probably most of you know the story of Daniel and the lion's den, right? And if you really paid attention in Sunday school, you might also know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace is connected to Daniel. Those 4 guys were pretty close. What you might not know is most of what Daniel got, like the messages that Daniel had, were visions and dreams of what were going to happen at the end of time. Specifically, the battles that were going to be fought during Armageddon, or the end of the age. And it tore Daniel up inside. Like he was getting physically sick from the anguish of all these visions and dreams. And it talks about in chapter 10, he decides he's going to fast to just kind of get a break. Like he calls on the Lord just to give me a little bit of a break. and he fasts, and 21 days into this fast, he gets a message from an angel. So he's like sitting on this riverbank, and an angel appears to him, and the first thing that the angel does is apologizing for running late. Isn't that crazy? Have you guys ever dealt with somebody running late? I have Prime. I get packages in 2 days. A couple weeks ago, I ordered something. That second day, it wasn't there. I pulled up my phone. It was getting there the next day. I was furious. It is 2-day shipping, not 3-day shipping. And I called customer service to make sure. That's what this angel does. Like, sorry, your message is late. And then he gives the wildest excuse. He says that on that first day of Daniel's fast, when he called out to the Lord for a word, some kind of message about what he's been seeing, what he's been dreaming, that angel was dispatched on the very first day. And then on the way there, he was stopped. And it says, by the principality in power over Persia. There was a demonic force over this city that stopped the angel from getting to Daniel. And this angel had to wait, right, in Persia for Michael, the archangel, to show up and take over. How wild is that? Not just that there's battles going on, but also like angels that have different powers, and it sounds like demons that have different powers too. And whenever Michael came in, he was able to make the rest of the trip to Daniel and give Daniel his message. You guys ever thought about that? That there could be actual spiritual powers in control of your city, in control of where you work? How crazy is that? The craziest part, though, is that that's probably the case, and instead we want to take up a battle against the conservatives. We want to take up a battle against the liberals. We want to take up a battle against the Democrats or the Republicans. Fascism, communism. Like, we want to put a face to the person that we're fighting when the enemy is something that we can't even see. When it comes to the battle, this spiritual battle and these weapons that aren't fleshly weapons, Paul has more to say about that. And this passage in Ephesians is what we're going to be basing the rest of this sermon series on spiritual warfare on. It picks up in Ephesians chapter 6. We're going to go ahead and read through it. You guys will see some of these same things that he mentioned in Corinthians brought up again. He says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand, therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. If we have like an instinctual desire to be ready for battle, do you think it might be because God's placed it in there to awaken us to the battle that's taking place? Like, whether we're aware of it or not, Satan is real. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, a battle is going on. Not just a battle for land or a battle for a title, it's a battle for your life. It's going to be so much better for us to be aware of it. Do you guys know that leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, America and the Japanese were in peace talks. There was a conversation happening trying to prevent the war. And I can't help but think that had something to do with the fact that we were attacked, and in 90 minutes, over 2,000 military personnel lost their life. In 90 minutes. That's not even counting the additional loss of infrastructure, of ships, of civilian lives that were lost. All because America was trying to stay out of a war that they didn't feel like they needed to be part of. Wouldn't Satan love to convince you that he's not a threat? Like, doesn't that make perfect sense if he's prowling around to convince you that he's just a myth, that he's just a legend, to hide behind that belief that he's just a symbol of evil or an archetype of the bad that's in the world? That seems like the perfect strategy. But we don't have to be afraid. There is this battle that's raging around us, but the war has been won. 2,000 years ago, the war was won with the death of Jesus and the resurrection. But we do have this battle to fight, and it's going on whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So you can take part, or you can be a victim. Because it doesn't work to just stick your head in the sand and close your eyes. Fortunately for us, God fights our battles. He is a mighty warrior, like we're about to sing. But he's also equipped us and empowered us. So not only do the weapons that we use come from God, but the ability and the power to use them does too. And that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Let's pray.